philosophers. My name is Mike, and I will be your instructor for this summer. I'm excited to look with you at some of the greatest ideas in the history of the West. I think we'll have a lot of fun together. Our lecture for today is really just an introduction to the class. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about the discussion board, and some assignments that will be coming up over the next several weeks. But you should also know that for this week, there's another video that will be posted on D2L. This is a lecture that's really covering the history of pre-Socratic philosophy. So you should watch that video as well, and make sure that you read thoroughly through your syllabus to make sure that you know what's going to be coming up over these next few weeks. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, like I said, my name is Mike. And I live in Brookings, South Dakota with my family, which you can see here on your screen. So you can see my wife, Becky, and our 3 children. Right behind me is our oldest son, Gus. He's 6 years old. And in front of me on the handlebars is our baby girl, Frankie. She's 3. And then you can also see Alistair. That's the baby that my wife is holding, and he just recently turned 1. And we have a lot of fun chasing these guys around in Brookings. You should also know that I am more of a philosopher than I am a historian. Now this class is cross-listed both as a philosophy class and as a history class, and we'll be doing a little bit of both. So we'll be covering historical details that we need to cover to make sure that we understand some of the movements that have happened in philosophy. But as a historian, I'm going to be focusing more on the ideas and analyzing the ideas that really have had consequences in history. So I'll be approaching the course as a philosopher, even though it's dual listed with history. So just to tell you a little bit about what to be expecting through the semester. So we have 10 weeks together where we're going to be really rushing through the history of Western philosophy. During these 10 weeks, you will be responsible for writing on the discussion board 7 of those weeks. So this week will count as your first week on the discussion board. And really for this week, it's just introductions. This will give us a chance to make sure that we all know how to use the discussion board. You can write your name, just introduce yourself that way, what year you are in school, your major, if you've declared a major so far, and maybe just a little bit about why you're taking this class and what you expect to get out of this class. And so we'll do that for this week as our first discussion board, and try to interact a little bit with each other, say hi to each other. The discussion board will be probably bigger over the next few weeks, where I'll expect you to write 300 words on a specific question in future discussion board, and you'll have to respond to people with 60 words. But for this week, just introduce yourself and then say hi to each other, and then that will get us off to a good start on the discussion board. As for your textbook and assignments, we'll talk about your textbook first. So your textbook, you can find it as an ebook in the Content tab on D2L. So if you click on the Content tab and then you go to the link that says Vital Source and you click on Vital Source, Bookshelf, SDSU, that's where you'll be able to find the ebook of your textbook. Now, if you don't want the book in ebook, you can also get the book in the bookstore. I have it right here. It's a loose leaf book that it's the same exact thing. And if you choose to pick this up in the bookstore, you will not have access to the ebook. But a few things I should let you know about the book. So the first half of the book, the first half of it is all a narrative of the history of philosophy. So all of your reading for this semester, at least your required reading, will be coming from the first half of this textbook, which covers the narrative of the history of philosophy. And that's where you get some of just broad themes of what have been what had been going on in philosophy with some of different thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, and different philosophical movements. That's going to be essential. And then in the second half of the textbook, so you have first half, second half. Second half is all primary sources, and I have these listed in your syllabus as suggested readings. Now, when I say suggested readings, I mean two things about that. So we're going to be doing a lot of reading over the summer, and I let you know each week about how much reading I'm expecting from you as far as required reading is concerned. For the suggested reading, it would be great if you could read all of that. But if you need to prioritize, I would focus more on your required reading. And then when it comes to your essay exam, so you're going to have 2 essay exams actually throughout the summer. The essay exams will focus only on the primary sources, which is the second half of your textbook. So you need both halves of the textbook. Make sure that you know both halves. Also pay attention to page numbers because the first half of the textbook is really one book that's all on its own. And then once you get to the second half, the page numbers reset back to 1. So make sure that you're just paying attention to where the page numbers are. But for your essay exams, which we'll talk about more just here in a moment, you'll want to look at the primary sources that are in the second half of your textbook. So just make sure you're aware of that. So again, you can find the textbook in e-form on D2L, or if you want the hard copy of it, you can go to the bookstore and get it there. And so that's your book for this semester. As far as your assignments, so you have just a few basic assignments. So the first one are reading outlines and your discussions, your 7 discussions. Now the reading outlines come from the first half of the textbook, and I've actually provided on D2L a Word document that you can look at and you can complete each week to make sure that you're getting the stuff that I want you to get. And you can follow the instructions on the document that's posted on D2L. You can just find it in the Introductions tab. And obviously, if you have any questions, you can email me. But I've really lined up the reading assignments to go with the discussions. So for the 7 discussions that you have, you'll have a question for your reading outline that you're supposed to answer in about 300 words. Sometimes it's a little less depending on the question. And you'll just take that question that you're answering on your reading outline, and you can just put that on the discussion board. And then, so the discussion board and the outlines go together. And really what I'm looking for is that after you post your the answer to your discussion question, that you engage with each other on the discussion board. And so your responses to your classmates should be at least 60 words, and they should have some substance. So I'll definitely be reading through all of the discussion boards to making sure that that we're engaging well with each other. But the reading outlines and the discussions go together. And again, if you have any questions about that or about any of this, just make sure that you email me and let me know. As I said with your essay exams, they'll come from the second half of your textbook from one of the primary sources. And here are how the essay exams work. You will pick one primary source from the suggested readings to analyze and critique. So you'll look at the list of suggested readings that have been assigned, and that's really the list that I want you to focus on. And you can find that list in the syllabus, in your syllabus in the course schedule section. That's where you'll find the suggested readings. And there's also instructions for these exams at the end of your syllabus. And you'll also have an exam rubric that helps you know exactly what I'm looking for you to do there. But you'll pick one primary source, and then I want you to critique it, tell me what you think about it, but I want you to engage with it philosophically. So if you disagree with what the essay is arguing, I want you to critique it in a way where you're responding to arguments that are being made. Tell me what you don't find compelling about them. and then provide an alternative perspective and arguments for your perspective of what you think about the essay that you're critiquing. And again, if you have questions about this, make sure that you email me. You can start these exams as soon as you would like. So I've provided the questions for you already for both exams. So you just pick one of the questions on both exams, and you can start it as soon as you like, submit it as soon as you like, as long as it's before the due date, and you'll be fine with that. And I should also let you know that I'm expecting you to submit the exams in Chicago format. So if you're not familiar with Chicago format, I've provided a cheat sheet on D2L where you can look through that. It's just basically a condensed form of the Chicago style. So you can look at that to see how to cite sources. Now for your essay exams, I'm really not expecting you to cite anything other than the primary source that you're critiquing, as well as the narrative at the first half of your textbook. So you can cite that to give you some just historical background for your analysis. But you can certainly find other sources too. So if you want to look up something on EBSCOhost, you can. If you want to use Google Scholar, you can. Just make sure that whatever resources that you're using, that you cite them, and that you cite them using Chicago format. And so for your last assignment for the semester, you'll have a paper. And here I'm giving you two options. So the first option for your paper will just be to write a very short history of philosophy. And the way that you can do this is you can take the reading outlines that you'll be filling out all semester long, and you can use those outlines as the outline for your paper, and then just fill it in and make it into a short history of philosophy. So that will be your first option. Now if you decide to go with this route, I want to emphasize that your paper should still have a thesis, and it should still be making an argument. And what I mean by that is I don't want you to submit just an objective history of philosophy where you don't tell me what you think about any of the philosophers. I want you to have a clear thesis of what you think about the history of philosophy. You can do this in a number of different ways. So maybe the thesis of your paper will be something like, after you've gotten a basic background in the history of philosophy, this is what we should learn from this history. So your thesis might be just a statement about what you think we should learn from the history of philosophy, and then throughout the telling of your history of philosophy, be pointing to that thesis all the way through the narrative. That would be one way that you could develop a thesis. You might also just pick a favorite philosopher and then use that philosopher as a critique of all the other philosophers. So maybe you really like Aristotle, and Aristotle becomes your focus throughout the whole paper, where you give an Aristotelian critique of all the philosophers that come after Aristotle, all that come before, and that's the thesis. But whatever you do with your history of philosophy, just make sure that you have some thesis and some argument that you want to present as you're telling the history of philosophy. The second option would be to write a research paper. Now in this situation, so either option is going to be 10 to 15 pages. If you do a research paper, you really could take one key idea that you want to explore for 10 to 15 pages. So maybe you really like Plato's idea of the forms, and you want to write a whole research paper just on Plato's idea of the forms and why that's important, or you can critique it. So that would be one option of what you could do. Or you might just pick a philosopher that you really like. If you like Aristotle, or if you want to write a paper on how Aristotle influenced Alexander the Great, these would all be the types of topics that you could do for a research paper. Now, if you go with the second option, the only thing that I ask is a few weeks in, if you want to do the research paper, just send me an email and let me know what you would like your research paper to be on. And so long as it's related to the history of philosophy, it will probably be okay. But just check with me first to make sure that I agree to what you're writing on, and that should be fine. And again, your paper should be submitted in Chicago format, just like your essay. As far as plagiarism is concerned, one of the things I always tell my students is that it's really awkward, so please don't do it. I don't like to bring it up to students when I do find instances of plagiarism. So what I ask is just make sure that you're writing everything in your own words, and when you don't, make sure that you cite what you're writing. I should also let you know about the software on D2L that we have. It's called Turnitin. It catches almost everything, and what I mean by everything is student papers from previous semesters. If you copy a paper from a student that was in my class earlier, it will catch that. It finds content from other websites or published books, even papers that are submitted to other universities. It finds those, and papers that are produced by term paper writing services. Turnitin has been able to catch all of those different instances, and one of the ways that it works, just so you know, if you use a term paper writing service, a lot of times what happens is that those services will use the same exact words for papers that are being submitted to other institutions, and Turnitin always finds those. So just make sure that you write everything in your own words, and we'll be fine with that. And also, just remember that if you quote something, make sure that you cite it, and that includes all of your required and suggested readings for this semester. So cite the textbook, cite the primary sources, and you'll be fine as far as plagiarism is concerned. This just gives you an example of what the Turnitin software looks like. So this is an actual paper that I received at one point, where you notice that everything's highlighted in the paper, and then it gives me a link to show me exactly where those words came from. And so it's really hard to get around this software, and so please just write everything in your own words and we'll be fine. The last thing I should say is that your schedule is laid out, and it's really your guide for the whole semester, with all of your reading that's required, your suggested readings, and then it lets you know what assignments are coming up, whether it's a discussion board or a reading outline. So make sure that you follow that. I also have at the top of each week pages of required reading, and this is just the reading that is coming out of the first half of your textbook, so that doesn't include suggested reading. And so what I would do is I would look ahead through the course schedule, and when you notice weeks where the reading's a little bit lighter, so for example in week 2 you only have 27 pages of reading, what I would recommend during that week would either be getting ahead on reading that's coming in the future, or if you have assignments that you want to work on and work ahead a little bit, you can do that as well. But make sure that you're just paying attention to what's coming up, so that you don't fall behind. And again, if you have any questions with anything, just let me know, and I look forward to getting started with this summer.